Hello everyone, Nathan P. Butler here, and this is episode 5 in our sort of new-ish relaunched viewer Q&A series. I had Q&As for the highest tier of my Patreon for a long time. We had the mini Q&As from the Star Wars Video Library Q&As, but after letting all those slide for a while, I relaunched these viewer Q&As relatively recently here. The last of these was recorded on October 1st, 2025. I then uploaded it shortly thereafter. That was number 4, and that is where I'm drawing questions from. For these, I always draw questions from the comments of the most recent one of these. So in this case, drawing from number 4 for episode number 5. If you want questions in potentially number 6, then you want to have your questions posted underneath this one, which is, again, number 5. Our first questions come from Mr. Wilson I Am. So first off, hey Nathan, I'm watching this while on vacation. It got me wondering, where is your favorite place you've gone on vacation? Then, do you like horror movies? I'm using that term as a broad umbrella, starting with the black and white Universal Monsters movies onward. If so, what is your favorite classic horror movie, and what is your favorite modern horror movie? And then, do you use video game guides seldom, often, or never? So vacation-wise, we actually haven't done a ton of vacations. Like, just in my adult life, vacations have tended to be going from the Atlanta area to visit family back in Indiana. Like, if we're going somewhere, it's typically just going to be that. When I was younger and we used to do like family vacations, I think the one that stands out to me was Destin, Florida. Just a really nice place, at least at the time. I haven't been there in ages. Pretty beaches and all, just a nice relaxing time. I was probably in, middle school maybe when we went. That's really the only thing that stands out in my mind as far as that goes. We did do Disney a million years ago when I was very, very young. But what really stands out in my mind from that was just Star Tours. Do I like horror movies? Yes, I do. Favorite classic horror movie? Okay, so for me, I'm not going to go classic like back into Universal Monsters era, though in that era, probably Dracula is the favorite for me. But if you want to go classic and consider classic like maybe 80s and stuff too, perhaps, I would say the one that stands out, and it's I guess kind of horror, is Monster Squad. I love me some Monster Squad. And it's got some Universal Monsters in it, right? Love Monster Squad. Fantastic movie. Fun movie. I guess kind of a horror movie because it has all those horror characters at least in it. The classic line, of course, Wolfman's got nards and all. And I actually, now that I've said the name, have the freaking theme song from the end of the movie stuck in my head again. From the mouth of babes comes dynamite. The Monster Squad gonna groove tonight. Anyway, yeah, so that was probably the favorite of the time, although, other things stand out from back then. Like, I guess you could say Alien is a horror movie to some degree. As far as these days, modern horror franchises, the ones that are probably my 2 favorites at this point, it's hard to tell which one is the favorite over the other, though I think I could probably tell, are the Scream franchise. I was huge into the original 3 Screams, and I have enjoyed the ones since. Love the Scream films. And also Saw. I really enjoy the Saw series. They're super, super gory. I don't think they need to go that far. But I actually really enjoy the interlinked storytelling of the Saw films. Like, if you watch the Saw films, they interweave with each other and connect in ways that I did not expect from a horror franchise. I was also for a while a big fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, but not as much now as I was back then. But I remember watching the living crap out of my VHS of Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare back in the day. And hunting for the Goo Goo Dolls song from the beginning. That took a while to actually find the CD so I could have the song. Really like that song. But of course I like horror movies. That should not be a surprise, right? I am a playtester for Final Girl. Which is a solo board game franchise built around the concept of the Final Girl and classic horror movie tropes. Yes, definitely a horror movie fan. I actually like playing horror-based stuff even more than watching horror-based stuff. Final Girl being the favorite of those. And then let's see, video game guides, seldom, often, or never. It kind of depends on the game. If I'm just playing to have fun, whatever, who cares? I'll just look it up if I get stuck on something. If it is something that is a heavy time sink or particularly difficult or a ton of collectibles I want to get, I'll tend to reference the guide. So like, I was trying to collect all the collectibles in Stellar Blade. I used a guide for the collectibles, not necessarily the base game itself. But then recently when I did the Platinum and got all the trophies also on the DLC of Bloodborne, that was straight up watching a guide through because I am not great at those games, but I can follow a guide and get good at those games as I go along and see how others have dealt with the strategy of it. So for like a Souls-like, Lies of P, or like that one. I think to some degree I did it with Demon's Souls remake. I can't recall. Those tend to be the ones where I go for the full-on watching a guide of someone playing through and talking about strategy as I then play the game. So like watch a big chunk, play that chunk. Watch a big chunk, play that chunk. Then we have a pair here from HowToMan126 or Mr. Badman, who asks, first of all, what was your first Star Wars experience? So according to my mom, at least, when I was very little, she took me to see The Empire Strikes Back in theaters, but I have no memory of it. I do have some vague memories, I think, though they do get kind of mixed up with some card art, as I've talked about before, of seeing Return of the Jedi in theaters in '83. But for me, a lot of my early memories with Star Wars was playing with the toys, the old Kenner line of toys. 2, who do you think would win a fist fight, Bob Iger or George Lucas? This is usually the kind of question I would not answer, because that's just not the kind of question I find, I don't know the right word, sensible, interesting, whatever. But I will say in this case, I did give it a little bit of thought beforehand, and I would say it depends. So Bob Iger would probably win under most circumstances. He seems to be in better shape than George Lucas. And if you have Bob Iger, and he is fighting not for the users as in Tron, or for the people as in various revolutions, but he's fighting for the shareholder value, then I can see Bob Iger fighting tooth and nail or to the death to try to win that fight, because it's Bob Iger. That said, I do think Lucas would win if the stakes had to do with his children's safety. Having watched the biography stuff of Lucas recently and being a parent myself, don't underestimate the ferocity of someone who is protecting their child, even beyond what they would do to protect themselves. I think if Bob Iger was threatening the life or safety of one of Lucas's children, Lucas would beat the living hell out of him and probably tear him limb from limb if he could, whatever it took to protect his children. But under normal circumstances, even protecting himself, I think Bob Iger wins, especially if Bob Iger is fighting for the moolah, for the shareholders. Then a question from the Zot Man, Forrest Pizot, I believe. Cool. Who asks, I've been desperate to know what your thoughts were on Andor Season 2. Can you share a synopsis of those thoughts and if it in any way changed the way you view the original trilogy? Just also want to give a shout out to Saw Gerrera and his Rido drug-induced rant. What a scene. Yeah, so I've said before that Andor is not only the best Star Wars series right now, and it is not only a great Star Wars series, it is a great TV series. Outside even of Star Wars, Andor is fantastic. It deserves all the awards. It got some, but it deserves all the awards. I don't know that it changed my view of the original trilogy itself, per se. It gave more context to certain things, but not really a lot to change the original trilogy itself. But it certainly gave more depth to the character and the tragedy of the loss of Cassian within Rogue One. I think Rogue One essentially acts as Season 3, if you want to call it that. Or you could call these, seasons, 0 and -1, I guess, for Rogue One. So to me, that's kind of almost a trilogy in and of itself. A fantastic, fantastic season. Great performances, nice twists and turns. I did like the format of the way they set it up, was sort of the year-to-year-to-year thing. I think the ending really sort of changed my perspective to some degree, but I will leave that to others to watch if you haven't seen it. But definitely Andor is something anyone should be watching. And I think, in particular, they really didn't pull the punches with Andor, especially in the second season, with the parallels to modern day and the parallels to modern political concerns. Again, I'm a social studies teacher. I've taught U.S. history, world history, American government, constitutional law, world geography, personal finance and economics, regular economics, AP economics, of macro and micro, and so on. So that kind of thing is always right up my alley anyway. But some of the stuff, like the speech from Mon Mothma, and in Season 2, and the manifesto that we saw back in Season 1 that repeats as an audio recording in Season 2 is outstanding stuff and relevant to any time, particularly modern times. So yeah, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Andor remains, now that it has its second season, it remains my top Star Wars TV series of all time, and probably will forever remain so, because it's really lightning in a bottle in that case. Then a question here from Cody Buchanan. What did you think of the new Star Wars trailer? I'm looking forward to seeing it in 2026. So that'd be the trailer for Mandalorian and Grogu, and I must say, my reaction was, meh. I mean, I like The Mandalorian. and that whole era of storytelling within the Disney Plus series. Not as big a fan of Book of Boba Fett because I think that they really didn't stick the landing at all on that particular one. But, you know, they're good shows. I enjoy The Mandalorian. I enjoy Ahsoka. You know, I enjoy that era, and I want to see more of the era. But I think the thing for me is, first off, we didn't really get much out of the trailer. I mean, we got Sigourney Weaver's character showing up. We got the fact that he apparently has a new Razor Crest type ship again. And it's just kind of regular Mando adventure. We got Zeb, which is pretty cool. But one, we really didn't get enough for me to get hyped about the story in any way. Which plays into the second one, which is that when it comes to The Mandalorian or any of this Disney Plus stuff, whether it's Marvel stuff or Star Wars stuff, they can do so much with the visual effects and with production quality, production values on the series on Disney Plus at this point, that I think it's even more important for a movie to justify its existence in some way. Why it needs to be a movie, not a season or episodes of this show. I think that has been something that's been around in sci-fi for a while. You know, you take something like the Star Trek films, particularly the Next Generation era films. Generations, it's the send-off, it's a handoff, of course, it's a big budget movie. First Contact, of course, all the big budget stuff with the Borg and all. Nemesis, probably could have stood to be a movie. But Insurrection, that really should have just been a two-parter of a TV series. What in Insurrection justified that being a movie at all? On the other hand, you have stuff like Serenity, right? Firefly is over, they need an end cap, and it was a much bigger tale. So, yes, Serenity made sense to have as a movie. But then you look at something like Mandalorian and Grogu, what is it about that film that is going to justify the fact that it is a film that is at that budget and that requires going to the movie theater to see it on the big screen? Why should it be on the big screen compared to this other stuff with the other episodes? What makes it better or different? And something that we should then, you know, be buying on 4K when it gets released and that sort of thing. Although I'd be buying it anyway. But what sets it apart from the show? Why isn't this just season 4 of Mandalorian or a Mandalorian limited series? We don't know yet. And to me, that means that right now, my hype is minimal because, I mean, cool, it's more Star Wars content, but it's going to be less convenient than something that to me seems like it's almost an equivalent thing until I know more. I can watch Disney Plus stuff at home, even if it's stretched out week to week. If I'm going to go see a movie in a theater, that is, at least in this day and age, kind of a pain in the ass. And then there's the waiting to be able to watch it at home. And it's not a uniquely Star Wars thing. Same thing with some of the stuff coming from Marvel. Some of the newest movies probably could have stood to be TV shows. Some of the TV shows were of a quality level and an impact that maybe they could have been movies. But with Star Wars in particular, getting into this era where the TV shows are becoming the basis of films, you gotta give me a reason for that to be a film and not just more Disney Plus stuff. Thankfully, I don't think it's going to have the same issues that the last time Star Trek did it had, which is when Star Trek had a new movie and it was Section 31, which was absolute horseshit. But yeah, give me another trailer, somehow justify why this is a movie, and I'll maybe even get over the really horrendous title of the movie. And then finally, some questions here from Michael Burgett. If I'm saying that correctly, hopefully. He asks, do you have a favorite Star Wars board game? Yes, Star Wars and tabletop games. Yes, this is my area. Woohoo! I don't know why I just did this. Oh my god! Anyway, what character does that? Is that a Jonah Hill thing? Anyway. Also, have you ever played the Star Wars The Queen's Gambit or Star Wars Epic Duels games? I was fortunate years after release to get Epic Duels at a reasonable price, but I've only played The Queen's Gambit at board game conventions as it's so expensive and rare to find complete now. So I actually never have played Queen's Gambit or Epic Duels, either one of those. For me, aside from some oddball stuff very early on, like this weird Sarlacc pit game back in the day with like a cardboard skiff sail barge thing over this weirdly constructed Sarlacc pit, aside from stuff like that, for me, Star Wars tabletop gaming really ramped up when Fantasy Flight got the license. I did some reviews of stuff for the Wizards of the Coast miniatures game at one point, and I was reviewing different RPG materials for a while, including some Wizards of the Coast stuff. But for me, it was really the Fantasy Flight era that got me into it in its heyday. So back in the days of X-Wing, Armada, Imperial Assault, eventually Legion would come out. Stuff like the LCG and so on. Now it's kind of given way to the deck building game and all. If I had to say a favorite out of those, there's really two that I would probably lean on. The first, prop time, is going to be Star Wars Outer Rim. So Outer Rim is from Fantasy Flight, and it is sort of a pick up and deliver type of game. You're playing as a smuggler, bounty hunter, whatever, to try to basically go from place to place in order to drop off things or bounty hunt or whatever it might be. This is one that I've enjoyed enough that I've actually picked up a 3D printed organizer for the inside to hold everything. That makes it a lot easier and faster to just get it out onto the table. I will say this is one that plays really well solo, but if you're going to play solo, you really need to get the expansion. It adds a whole bunch more cards to it, a whole bunch more characters, and it's where the Automa, so to speak, the solo AI plays differently. Basically, in the original game, they're just kind of like the one solo AI deck. Here, the solo AI includes some cards that are specific to each character and the generic cards, and when you have unfinished business, instead of being able to play against a solo AI that is a smuggler but not a bounty hunter, you can actually play as a solo player against either a bounty hunter or smuggler AI, or both. You can actually play a 3-player game, basically, with one solo player and 2 AI-controlled players. Outer Rim is definitely fantastic and still readily available today, although its playmat is harder to find. So Outer Rim is the one I definitely play the most because it's the one that's most convenient and I really enjoy the gameplay of it, but the one that is probably my single favorite of all time is Imperial Assault. And when it comes to Imperial Assault, as with the other Fantasy Flight game stuff, I was getting it all as it was released back in the day and even doing videos on it on the channel here. So I actually have all of it, except for promo items, and I did sell off all the skirmish maps because I like to play campaign or solo rather than playing skirmish, so I sold off all those like mats that you could get since you could just build them with the pieces anyway. This one I have sort of blinged out, I guess you could say, at least to some degree. This is where I store my Imperial Assault collection. I'll change the camera angle so we can take a look at all this stuff. So this is the complete collection storage bag from Feldherr, F-E-L-D-H-E-R-R, out of, I believe, Germany. So what it's got, it's been in a closet, so it's got some dust and stuff on it. So it's a gigantic bag. It does have a handle on it that you can carry it by. It also has a strap you can put over your shoulder. It has a storage slot here in the front. I have some boxes of stuff in here I'll show you in a moment that are not official. And then the bag itself is actually the home for a box inside, just takes up the entire thing. And inside the box, which just took the top layer with it, is a ton of foam trays that you can fit everything into nicely. So you got foam trays for the minis, foam trays on the bottom, have like the map tiles and everything. I haven't labeled everything. The next thing I want to do is kind of label the slots to make it easy to spot everything. But, like, you got that. Here's an example of one that has map tiles and tokens in it. The only downside being that because they wanted to do foam, which also is nice for keeping things relatively light, for some of the heavier stuff, like where you're trying to carry around the map stuff, the map pieces, map tiles, it does get a bit heavy. So you got to make sure you're kind of positioning your hands underneath it for support so it doesn't just, flop everything out onto the floor because the foam does have some, give to it. Yeah, this was a big deal. Yeah, there's a company name there, Feldherr. This was a big deal when I picked it up because I was finally able to take all of my Imperial Assault stuff out of a bunch of Plano giant like tackle boxes, like several of those sitting in a closet, and put them all into the one package here. It is big. I do have to store it in a closet to have room for this, but it's nice to have everything in one place. And if I ever do want to travel with it, which I don't, I do have an easy way to do that too. So great option here. They have different options depending on how much stuff you want to put in there. This is the one designed for the entire collection minus the skirmish mats. It does, I'm told, fit sleeved cards. I have not sleeved anything. I then store all the rule books and little rule sheets and whatnot here in a binder inside some, page protector type things here. It's everything, including a rule book printed out that goes with one of the things that I have printed out as sort of a bling thing on my own, a fan-made thing on my own, which we'll look at here now. So the thing about Imperial Assault is it is designed to be played as a one versus many type of game. I actually have a demo game here on the channel. It's one of the most viewed videos on this entire channel, oddly enough. But basically, it's an Imperial player versus multiple Rebel players, or at least one Rebel player, typically. But that means you can't really play it solo or cooperatively. Somebody's got to be the Empire. They did eventually put out an app called the Legends of the Alliance app, which allows you to play solo or cooperative because it kind of handles the Imperial stuff. But the downside of that is that the campaign isn't quite the same. It covers some of the same stuff, but not necessarily all. So you can't really play all of your Imperial Assault content with the app. You can only play some of it, and in some cases, alternate stuff, or even brand new stuff that's only in the app itself. It kind of plays a little bit more like playing like Mansions of Madness or something like that. But there was a fan of Fantasy Flight Games who, back in the days, got named Red Jack, or goes by Red Jack as the username. And Red Jack had created some automated stuff for playing Descent 2nd Edition, which is a similar system to this, who then turned that attention to Imperial Assault and created Red Jack's automated Emperor variant and Red Jack's automated Imperial variant. The Emperor variant, I'm understanding, is a little bit more wonky because it tries to replicate an actual Imperial player rather than just automating the Imperial side. But Red Jack's automated Imperial variant, or RAIV, R-A-I-V, became very well thought of. It has been updated by others since. And I was fortunate enough that when I saw that for the first time on BGG, Board Game Geek, years ago, somebody had set up a thread saying, if you want to professionally print the cards needed for Red Jack's automated Imperial variant, here are the files, here are the settings to use, and here is the website you can do this through and approximate costs. And sure enough, in my bag, I keep these two little boxes because what I did was I printed out the entirety of the cards needed for Red Jack's automated Imperial variant. So I now can play anything from Imperial Assault, solo or cooperative, without needing an Imperial player, thanks to that rule book that I've got in the binder and these sets of cards. It has like mission cards. It has cards that help you automate the Imperial characters and all, and what they do, what their priority is. It is fantastic. You can still find the files. I don't think the thread about how to actually professionally print them is still up, but it's absolutely fantastic. It is by far the best bling I've ever bought for a board game. That is not to say I haven't done some other bling for the game. For the little control panels, I got a set of these little 3D printed control panels for the crates. There's little crates with a place to put the token on them, and some doors that you can actually open and close here, 3D printed. And then to keep track of multiple individual miniatures. If you got, like, you'll say you're playing with the Stormtroopers, there's multiple Stormtroopers controlled by the same card. I got several of these that are 3D printed that basically you put the card here. This is where you keep track of, like, the wound tokens and status tokens and whatnot. Got a bunch of those of different types and colors, and then matching rings with the dots that you would put these rings around the bases to match whichever slot they go in, so you're keeping track of the damage and stuff on here rather than next to the miniature, which is a pain in the ass. And then since typically I would be playing solo, so I'd be playing with basically two characters with just me, I got two of these nice wooden printed dashboards here, where you got some little acrylic cubes to keep track of stuff over here. You put your character card, your other cards and stuff there, status tokens and whatnot, and then a little bit that you can put in here and slide back and forth and whatnot. So just a couple of nice dual layer wooden boards. If you're a tabletop gamer, Etsy is very much your friend if you don't have your own 3D printer or something. And then I also got, it's not really bling for this game, but it's something I got for this game that I've used for others as well. I got a little laser pointer, but it's not a regular laser pointer. It is instead a line of sight tool here. It's not meant for that, but that's what I use it for. So basically, like, I can point down at the map and turn it on and trace whether there's actual line of sight with that straight laser line using this. So yeah, big fan of tabletop games. Star Wars games in particular stand out. A lot of the old stuff I've sold away, like Armada and X-Wing and such over the years. But Imperial Assault is an absolute favorite that I've still hung on to. Outer Rim certainly comes in as a close second and is the one that I get to the table more often just because of how small it is compared to Imperial Assault. and I'm hoping we'll see more soon. There are new games coming out all the time. Mandalorian Adventures, Star Wars deck building game. A lot of them I don't think hold a candle to some of that early Fantasy Flight game stuff, but still fun in their own right. All right, and that is all the questions we have for this time around. So again, thank you very much for watching. I hope I answered your questions thoroughly if you are someone who asked, or at least answered to your satisfaction. And if you want to have questions in the next of these, make sure to put them in the comments of this video, and I will grab them next time around. Again, I do not look back at previous videos, though, only the most recent one. So make sure you're always looking for the most recent one when posting your question. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next Q&A.